I'd like to welcome you all to the Microsoft Sustainability Dialogues in Saudi Arabia podcast. This is where we take a view on the measures being taken by both government and corporates and individuals across the sort of sustainability argument and take a deep dive into seeing what some of those stakeholders are doing. And of course, we're focusing on Saudi and a lot of projects being launched there and a lot being very conscious of the sustainability space. And I'm delighted to have joining me today Dr. Ana Costa, Head of Sustainability at KAUST, which of course is the King Abdullah University for Science and Technology. Ms. Yasmin Barbir, Head of Sustainability for the MENA region at Nestle. Dr. Kishan Kudai, Regional Team Leader for Nature, Climate and Energy at the UNDP for the Arab region, and Anna Hudson, Sustainability and Environmental Senior Manager at the Dir'a Gate Development Authority in Saudi Arabia. So thank you everybody so much for joining us today. Our topic today that we're going to zero in on is circular economy, empowering society to make sustainable choices. Of course, there's a huge, the word sustainability is a huge umbrella above a lot of sub areas, and we're going to look at the circular economy and try and focus in on how society and the stakeholders really within it, which includes everybody, including people in corporations, what choices are being made there. And as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of new projects happening in Saudi, and let's look at what initiatives are being taken there. Anna, I'd like to start with you, Anna Hudson, not Dr. Anna, if I can. Tell us a little about, because we're lucky enough today to have, somebody from the construction sector, someone from the food and beverage, we have academia, and we have even an NGO. So fantastic sort of mix of opinion that we hope to get your views on. So Anna, let's start with you and tell us a bit about the Gate Development Project and what its sort of primary sustainability goals are.
Of course, I'd be happy to. Hi everyone, pleasure to be here and join this conversation. Very timely conversation. I think this is at the forefront of everybody's thoughts right now. For those who are not familiar with the Dir'a Gate project, we were established, the Dir'a Gate Development Authority was established in 2017 with a mandate to transform this historic district here in Riyadh called Ad-Diriyah into a world-class destination. And the reason why this project is really different from all the other giga projects that you hear about in Saudi Arabia is because it has a vision to anchor our vision for the Saudi future on a jewel from the Saudi past. And the jewel from the Saudi past is the Atari Palace, which is right at the heart of our development. And the significance of this UNESCO World Heritage Site is that it was the capital of the first Saudi state. So this is where Saudi Arabia started. So we are developing this community surrounding this very significant site and reflecting the very core of the traditions and culture and heritage of Saudi Arabia. So because of that, when I looked 2.5 years ago how to establish the sustainability framework for Dir'a Gate, I looked into the core of the Saudi values. And what I found was that the resource material impact reduction and circular economy are really something that's front and center in this discussion, because this is what Saudi culture was anchored in as well. If you think about it, it's a culture that developed in the desert climate where resources were not abundant. So all resources, if you go a few generations back, were very valued. Its use was very conscious. And so we're trying to rescue all that. We're trying to bring this back, as part of our development. So we have very ambitious sustainability goals regarding construction, planning, design, operations, but we're also trying to bring back the culture of sustainability, the culture of using resources wisely, the culture of reusing, repurposing, that it was there all along. We're just trying to bring it back again to the surface. So
okay,
this is one of the key.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I mean, Anna, let me just stick with you and let's just go to sort of one of the broad sort of questions that always come up in this conversation, and it really applies to everybody, and that is partnership, and I'll ask you about that first and perhaps then go to everyone else. in terms of, how important is that? I mean, you've got all these ambitions within your project, but who are you partnering with, and how important is that in terms of reaching your goals?
Well, this is, I think we all can recognize that implementing sustainability, high sustainability ambitions is not an easy task. In a place where the infrastructure is not developed yet, where the regulatory framework is still being developed. So every month, the National Center for Environmental Compliance changes a little bit the regulations, everything becomes a little more stringent, a little more careful with the environment. And it's no different in terms of sustainability. So we're trying to keep up the pace of the change very, very quickly, but the infrastructure is not necessarily there. So when we're trying to design a community to achieve, as we just did, the leadership for energy and environmental design, platinum certification for our community. How did we achieve that? We achieved that by partnering with external stakeholders that can help us achieve this high targets. So in one of those cases, what we're trying to do for material impact reduction, we, Reagate just signed a memorandum of understanding with CERC, the Saudi investment recycling company. And what we're trying to do is say, well, we're developing all this community here. We're developing the infrastructure for collection of waste, for segregation within our community. We know how we're going to do, we're planning for that within our boundary. But what happens when it goes outside? Who is going to process this waste? So we are partnering with CERC for that purpose to say, can you help us? And they're also part of the family of companies here in Saudi Arabia. They're developing their capabilities to help achieve these ambitions. So we say we're predicting that we're going to produce this amount of waste. This is how we're thinking about we can reuse and recycle. Can you help us? And they're saying, well, let's try to think what facilities you need, at what capacity, where, so that we can build a future together. So these partnerships with other stakeholders is critical, and the partnership with the community to make sure that they buy into this and they create this culture of sustainability so that they can utilize the infrastructure that we're creating.
And you mentioned the word culture. Of course, this is a huge cultural shift across the board, isn't it, amongst individuals and corporates. Yasmin, welcome again. Let me go to you and let's look at the sort of the corporate angle from Nestle, from a huge global food and beverage company, which obviously has a lot of packaging, a lot of waste, a lot of, and you're heading Nestle's net zero emissions roadmap across the region, not in Saudi Arabia. Tell us, I mean, on that, not just on the point of partnership, but in terms of policy, Anna just mentioned, policies are changing all the time. Governments trying to figure out what to do. As a private sector company operating and having to deal with these very dynamic policies, how difficult has that road been in your planning?
Thank you so much for this valuable question. Well, definitely the topic of ESG, environmental social governance, and sustainability is on the rise. It's a hot topic everywhere. It has been at the forefront, maybe in the more developed countries or foreign countries, but in our MENA region, it's not far. Already we have COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt this year, and next year in the UAE. And you see the topic as well bubbling when it comes to Jordan, when it comes to Morocco. Many companies are starting to collaborate in advocating for policies, for regulation, framework, adding from our global and regional expertise beyond this market to furnish as well the public sector with insights, with good practices that have been applicable elsewhere. And, because of the global footprint, you anticipate what will be eventually approaching our region. So there is an appetite from the strategic perspective in the governments, be it the Ministry of Climate Change, Environment, Ministry of Industries, Ministries of Economy. everybody is stepping up. And the beauty is that the private sector's voice is welcome. So there's this inclusion aspect, because they believe 1 + 1 = 3, and all of us are learning, but we have the let's say a bit of know-how from our colleagues elsewhere, because we monitor on the radar the evolution. So dialogue, workshops, think tanks, sharing good practices. This is all happening at a different pace in different countries. And when it comes to Saudi, I'm happy as well to share that part of Coalition Circle that stemmed in the UAE, we are advocating as multinational companies together with big national companies in Saudi, with Muwan, who is the National Center for Waste Management, to advocate for a national strategy, for example, for waste management, and to advocate for extended producer responsibility, EPR, which will tackle the post-consumer waste or the end of life. And this is fundamental to enable a circular economy. So even if sometimes the law or some executive policies are in the making, we are having the interventions in time in order to feed the authorities how to shape the policy better, in order to be able to embed different types of industries, sectors, and sizes of companies, because we need to always remember it's not always that the big multinationals or companies who will lead the way. We need to embed on the journey all the SMEs that make the bread and butter of any economy.
Of course, and it's not one size fits all, is it, for any solution?
Absolutely.
Whether it's actual, implementation in terms of speed or tools, I suppose, of what you're implementing. Dr. Anna, welcome again. Let's talk a little bit about, just to give you a general question, throw it your way, as you are based in Saudi. And first, how far would you say, in general, has the kingdom come in its circularity drive, let's say? And secondly, how important obviously is education, where you're sitting at, as a sort of resource tool to spread the message of what needs to be done?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Regarding the question on the developments of the kingdom, it's clearly under Vision 2030 a great effort to improve this component of circularity. I must say that the announcement that was made on the former G20 by Saudi Arabia and led by Saudi Arabia on carbon circularity is a good example how the country is trying and is making a movement to lead on circularity. So we can see the different fronts, and carbon management is a particular one, a very important one. And in that front, KAUST actually has established a very important program to support the national effort on carbon circularity. And a lot of our research that we do at KAUST, which is correlated, of course, with sustainability, supports the circularity aspect. This is one in particular because we have and we drive research on carbon management. It could be, and I'll give an example on reuse of carbon, on new synthetic fuels, on the aspect of ecosystem preservation and development, and the uptake of carbon from the atmosphere to enhance this ecosystem, to the development of alternatively supporting renewable energy sources. So pretty much on that front. But I must say that behind our research, and we definitely, as a note, KAUST was built on 4 principles of sustainability that are part actually of our logo: water, food, energy, and environment. And all the aspects of circularity are embedded in these 4 pillars of research. Not only our research and education that we provide to our students that align pretty much with these concepts of circularity and align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the way we promote the collaboration and I would say the empowerment of students in our campus to be part of the change. And we want to make sure that these students, when come out from our university, are able to provide significant positive impact in the society. So pretty much the courses and the research they are doing supports that and the innovation that we do it. And there are pretty good examples also on the innovation side. We have also a very interesting ecosystem of startups that have circularity as part of their principles, and also how this correlates the way we live and work in our campus. We are a campus, but we are also a city, and of 7,000 people. So we do have also a group of operations that support our campus and community. And on that front, I would like to enhance that when CAUS was created 11 years ago with the principles of sustainability, our campus was built and it actually was the biggest campus in the world on LEED Platinum. And also the first waste management system was implemented in our campus by that time, and we are still improving all the time our operations to support what we do and teach to our students. So we try to bring all this holistic aspect of sustainability together as a community.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the new generation, I don't think we have a problem with that. I think it's convincing us, or at least me and others ahead before them to change their ways. I think we're being put to shame by the new graduates that are coming out of colleges now. Thank you, Dr. Anna. We'll come back to you. Dr. Kashan, welcome again. You're working with the UNDP, of course, sort of NGO capacity, which has you know, many challenges to be dealing with on the sort of on the surface. Does your organization really have the capacity to be thinking about sustainability and long-term solutions when you are really confronted with dealing with so many other, obviously more imminent issues? How does it confront that challenge? And what support do you have from the finance community, for example, or from member organizations to help you advance on these aims?
Right. No, thank you. Very good question. So the United Nations, of course, has been present in the Gulf and specifically in Saudi Arabia for over 50 years. And through our local office in Riyadh, United Nations Development Program, we've partnered with our government entities in Saudi Arabia and across the Gulf, civil society organizations, NGOs, the private sector, across that period of time, supporting this transition from being a least developed country to a middle income country to what is, of course, in recent decades, a high income oil exporting economy. And that transition over the last half century or more has been quite a remarkable and needless to say, across the GCC, whether it's in UAE or Saudi Arabia or other parts of the Gulf. The United Nations, of course, is the leading global platform for taking action on the green transition today. The conventions that were enacted in the 90s on climate change, on biodiversity, on land degradation, continue to have force and shape countries' actions, national policies, the actions of the private sector in particular, more in recent years. And so through these conventions, what we do is we partner with our state parties, the members, the countries that form the United Nations, to take action on these issues. Today, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, is the UN's largest provider of grants globally, about $3 billion of grants we provide specifically for the environment, specifically for the green transition to developing countries around the world to scale up action on climate change, protection of biodiversity, and indeed the circular economy. When you talk about finance, very good point. Grants are all good and well, and of course that's an important part, the tugboat, let's say, of broader finance. But there's trillions of dollars necessary, the biggest market opportunity really on the road to 2030 and 2050. The green transition is a multi-trillion dollar opportunity. And this is why we're seeing major efforts by governments and the private sector to actually enhance policies and enhance investments. So through our cooperation with our partners, we're actually seeing scaled up initiatives bringing together public-private partners, putting in place the right kind of policies at the government level to de-risk, to open up channels for greater private investments into things like technology, but also to reduce footprints. So we're seeing, of course, as we've heard today, a major shift in reducing the footprint, increasing the efficiency of the growth, reducing the energy intensity, for example, in a place like Saudi Arabia, of the economy. And I think that's where a lot of this is landing, let's say, is in intensity improvements, the intensity of growth, reducing that intensity of growth. I think this is more relevant today more than ever if as we head out of the current couple of crises that we faced the last couple of years. Commodity prices have, of course, risen quite significantly. So waste, in particular, is really a resource. And if we think about the amount of minerals, natural resource content that's wasted, especially in a place like Saudi Arabia, some of the world's highest per capita levels of consumption of resources, whether it's on energy or water or of course waste production. So I think this is a major, I would say it's an act of building resilience of the society in the Gulf and Saudi Arabia in particular. If we look ahead to the next generation, making sure that society and the economy is resilient for the future.
Yeah, and as you said, more reason today in terms from an economic point of view to save where we can, not just the environment, but on cost. Yasmin, if I could just go to you, jump to you just in terms of supply chain. I mean, obviously the products you make have a very, you get your different supplies of resources from wherever you get them, and those go into your chain of production and then obviously you're marketing your own goods. How tricky, and this applies to the energy sector and it applies to other industrial sectors as well. How tricky is it in terms of certification or verifying your supply chain that's coming into a group like Nestle, and making sure that what you're using is up to your standard, and then obviously going on to be produced by you and sold on. Is there enough cooperation on that front? Is there enough sharing of best practice and goodwill of certification?
Well, actually, if we look at across the value chain from farm to fork, the biggest emissions for us, they sit in our supply chains, but mainly in agriculture. So it's not discussing, transportation or logistics, which is of a very concise percentage out of the total. But in the end, we are the global food and beverage company in the world. So sourcing ingredients comes from agriculture, and it is 2/3. And over there, we are having a lot of projects with the thousands of farmers that we deal with the as well numerous suppliers that we deal with. So we are advocating for a transition towards regenerative agriculture vis-a-vis the conventional agriculture, which is more intense when it comes to emissions. So we have dedicated funds in order to help a just transition with the farmers. For example, dairy, it's 50% of our ingredients where there is a high emission factor. So we are having interventions in order to shift the dairy farms to be net zero. So there are a lot of initiatives when it comes to animal welfare, feed, herd management, biodiversity, soil health, water conservation, manure management, biogas, etc., etc. So and this comes as well with looking at the whole ecosystem of reinforcing the principles of nature, biodiversity, forest positive strategy, how we look at the community as a whole, because people, they remain centric and at the heart of decision making wherever we are. So this is key. And then definitely the next bucket is when we source those ingredients, we produce our products in our manufacturing sites. So we are rethinking our operations and manufacturing. And by 2025, we need to complete the shift towards 100% renewable electricity, and so on and so forth across the value chain until we reach packaging, what we're doing with our packaging, the whole vision towards a waste-free future, and ensuring that none of our packaging ends up as litter or waste in oceans, rivers, or even landfill, and how we want 100% of our packaging by 2025 to be recyclable, reusable, refillable, and as well to cut virgin plastic, which is the fossil fuel again, by 2025, and ultimately reducing emissions by 20% in 3 years, half them by 2030, and inshallah land the net zero by 2050. So that's how we look at it.
I mean, and those are incredibly impressive and very ambitious targets, and I'm sure other big corporates have similar ones, but that's excellent. And again, but from a financial point of view, maybe I'll go to you, Anna, Anna Hudson, just kind of to pick up on what Yasmin just said, very ambitious targets there. Of course, that all takes a very good, that requires a long-term view in terms of bottom line. Let's say when you're running a project, you're going to be taking some more upfront costs than you would be for this long-term benefits and these targets. Of course, there's pressure from shareholders to do these things, so there's pros and cons to that from a finance point of view. Anna, I mean, in your project, it's probably very different, obviously, but how much are financial realities dictating how fast one can implement such measures on the construction industry as well?
Well, our project is very unique in that sense, and I think that we have a little bit of an advantage of that because we have such a vision of being true to the authentic traditional architecture that was developed hundreds of years ago. The way that we are sourcing the construction materials, the materials for the basic construction, the first phase of our project are from local materials because we're trying to be true to the vernacular architecture here in the region. So this is a wonderful thing in terms of sustainability. The challenge was we had to study in the very beginning how we were going to build the mud bricks, the very mud bricks to build all this houses, the hotels, the retail. We had to build the mud bricks first. So we had to find just the right amount of the silt, sand, clay, straw within the region to try to find the perfect optimal way to build this mud bricks within here. And so we are in the process of trying to build our materials, our construction materials ourselves within the region, which will of course result in a much more sustainable product. The other thing that it's utilized in a traditional architecture is the red limestone. So again, we had to find quarries here nearby where we could extract that and try to do the permitting, the environmental permitting with the least impact possible. And all this is embedded in the very beginning of the planning on how we're going to start getting the project out of the ground. So this is number one. So there's the traditional architecture and the building with local materials. That is a key component. And then, of course, we are not just building everything with traditional tools, and there's a lot of the modern construction techniques that we have to utilize, but we transpose the same values to that. So when we're excavating to build our basements, there's a lot of rock that is excavated. If that cannot be used for paving, say, it can be crushed and reused, as rock base or as aggregate for other areas. We are trying to reutilize everything. If there's topsoil that has some value with seeds, we are trying to reutilize that. So we're really going back to that thought that Kisham mentioned, that there's no waste. Waste is a resource. You should think about waste as another resource stream. So that's for some of these basic materials. But then you go to something like interior design, and then you have to think, can I find enough products with environmental product declarations here? And the answer is not necessarily so. The market is not mature yet, but we are really confident that we can help drive this change, because the combination of so many giga projects with trying to achieve the Vision 2030, trying to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all of these are creating these external drivers that we need to show our support, show our contribution as a giga project within Saudi Arabia. So with all of these projects having the same demands, we believe firmly that we will help drive the change for a better and more mature market in the couple of years to come, and that those will be available for us in the near future.
Okay, great. Dr. Anna, do you think that industry in general out there, and you've worked, I know that you're at KAUST now, but you've worked across many sectors before in terms of environmental sustainability, and worked with many sectors. Is industry generally sort of leveraging technology enough? Is there any low-hanging fruit out there that is not being utilized, obviously, to integrate into circular economy drives?
Well, that's a key point. I would say a lot of even including the things that we are doing in our research in our labs. The translation of this science to real scale solutions. Actually, a question of the scale of the process and how to make it the process efficient in terms of investment and return. That's a key point. Regarding industry, of course, there's tons of opportunities, and I would say that the innovation and research is a key point. So the partnerships between universities and industry and even government to leverage these new solutions are key. And I think that's where universities also play a very important role to also allow us to be test beds of solutions. And this is actually one aspect that we as a campus are trying to bring to allow different industry to come and test solutions and partner with our faculty to develop new technologies and to allow including that these technologies are tested in our campus. I will give you some examples. I think it's good to bring tangible things to the table, right? Very interesting things that are happening here as a small ecosystem that we can provide. For example, in terms of our water use, in terms of circularity in water. So we have our own desalination plant in our campus. And this, of course, has a carbon footprint associated to our water use. But this water is used in the campus and community. It's being treated also inside the campus because we also own a wastewater treatment plant. And this water is fully 100% reused to irrigate our green areas. So this is one thing that's being increased for all of the past years. And currently, on our total water that we have, actually we need more water to use to irrigate areas. So this is one aspect of circularity that we are bringing value to a resource, a key resource in the kingdom, in our own community. And there are other research that's happening in terms of water harvesting in atmosphere that is happening also on the campus and so on. Another example I would like to give is our waste. And we are tackling this in many fronts. First of all, to try to minimize the amount of single-use plastics on campus, and this being part of a long effort. And it's not easy because we have, of course, different partners that are providing service in the campus. And as we were talking, a lot of the things that for example, I would be available in Europe, where I come from, or still not available here, but we are making an effort to create a consciousness and education that we need to shift our behavior. For example, we removed and are bringing solutions for the single use of plastics in our supermarkets, cutlery, try to avoid them in big catering services. And on that front, what we have currently is actually a very interesting program of segregating and recycling a lot of our materials, and also regarding to organic waste. So we have our own composting facility. So our organic waste that comes from our diners and our residential areas are now being brought to this composting facility inside a campus to be treated, to be used as a valid product. So this is another example that is actually very interesting happening in our own ecosystem. As a complementary to this, another example of a startup that is, again, bringing material that was waste for a specific industry, in this case, date industry, which Saudi Arabia is one of the highest producers, and also poultry industry. They are producing bioplastics. And so we are now trying to bring these bioplastics also to be used inside our campus in bioplastics in plastic bags, and small, more sturdy plastic. And this plastic will go to our composting facility. So there's a story behind, there's an education behind that we also need to do in our own community for the people that are living here, but outside. So we need to tell this story also and to explain to people that this is a natural shift that needs to happen to all of us. Also regarding, for example, in food waste, which is critical, right? We're talking about always food security, and we know how much Saudi Arabia is in risk on the specific aspects, not only water security, it's food security.
Well,
so we will need to tackle that.
Yeah, let me go to Dr. Kishan on that, because I wanted to ask you, Dr. Kishan, about this sort of nexus of food, water, and energy. You know, it's often talked about, the circularity of how those can all feed into each other. They're all emitters. Well, food and energy are, and of course there's wasted water and how an energy produces water, etc., and how that can be treated. So across that nexus of those three huge resources, of course, the three most elemental resources we have, and we touched earlier on the cost of commodities and the cost of everything today, and that's not going away anytime soon. How much more progress do you think there is to be made in trying to bring that nexus together? It comes with a cost, I know, but is the knowledge out there that of what we need to do and the projects that you're involved in?
Right, absolutely. I mean, the nexus has been a hot topic, I would say, for about 25 years globally, and in the GCC, in the Gulf, and in Saudi Arabia, of course, since it kind of passed its kind of peak domestic food productivity quite a while ago, and water no better. So definitely the local production in the Gulf of food and water is one of the more carbon intensive things that happens in the Gulf, including in Saudi Arabia. Right, so the desal, largely for growing the fodder for the animals, whether for the dairy or for the meat, et cetera, et cetera. So the connection is like extremely close in the Gulf and in Saudi Arabia. And so let's say, how many barrels of oil that could be saved for future generations, health and education benefits, is actually burned every day for the giant container of yogurt, right? Locally, I'm saying that's produced locally. So, I mean, that's definitely a trade-off for the future generation. That's a strategic asset, not just natural resource, but a strategic asset. When we talk about the carbon assets in the Gulf. So, I mean, the nexus in the Gulf is quite unique and quite serious. I would say it's almost a existential situation to actually shift quite radically and quickly to the green transition, to actually be able to meet food and water requirements in a much more low carbon manner. So locally, a lot to be done on that front, I think, in terms of making that nexus in policy. For example, bringing ministries closer together, formulating those national policies in a way that connects things like energy subsidies, water subsidies, even land use and agriculture related policies, to connect the dots between those things, which sometimes sees perverse incentives for overconsumption for limited value.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would argue that it has to be top down. Yes, we're all have to act from the ground up and do our bit, but without that top down clear policy clarity for corporates, for whether they're SMEs or large companies, and some kind of balanced approach to that. I'm afraid we're running out of time very quickly. We've run out of time already, but I want to go to all of you to conclude with two things, with just two questions in one. Yasmin, I'll start with you. How much is the challenge of this year in terms of what we've seen happening with commodity prices, inflation, impacting a company like yours in terms of its commitment to sustainability? And quick answer though, if you can. And secondly, what would be the top on your wish list for your company to be doing that it's not doing already towards the sustainability route?
Well, yes, everybody is facing unprecedented inflation, hike in cost, etc. But the commitment towards sustainability is ingrained in our strategy. And what we are doing, and I'm sure everybody is doing, is trying to be as cost efficient as possible. We are relooking at all the buckets of business operations, trying to optimize, come with savings projects to reinvest behind this ultimate commitment, which has been voted for with a $3.2 billion CHF budget until 2025 by our General Assembly last year. So we are, immune from this front and will continue to reinvest. But this is a call as well for green finance and banking and the investors with ESG appetite to jump in and to back up key projects everywhere. And when it comes to request of my company, just this is a purposeful journey. So it is in the DNA. It has been always part of our creating shared value, but the planet now is magnified. It's bringing, reigniting the purpose in the hearts of employees to start with, not only creating value for shareholders, but it is for future generation. So not as Yasmin in the corporate world, as a mom, this is what drives me every day to make a difference in my role. And the aggregate effect will create a ripple effect for the economy communities where we are.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's become this fundamental shift that companies actually need to base every decision on sustainability, and then
By
everything
design
else.
at core in every decision making.
Everything, and that's the first, let's say, criteria, and then move on. Very quickly, Anna, I'll go to you. It doesn't have to be particular to your project, but just what do you think is the next step for Saudi to take, for example, you're based there, in terms of what needs to do, what needs to change today to move forward more on this circularity?
I think that one of the topics that we had in the very beginning, that we were talking about how to empower the society to make the sustainable choices. In terms of empowerment, I think that this massive effort on the culture shift, you have a young Saudi generation that is eager to take this on board, to really make a change and make the Saudi of the future. So I think investing on the education of this generation, it will be transformative to the country. We are already living a time that is unprecedented in Saudi Arabia. The change in the last 3 years have been something. I've lived here for 13 years, so I know that the last 3 years have been just incredible to see. So the potential with intensive education is going to be tremendous. However, it's important to make sure that the education goes on par with the development of the infrastructure, so that all those ambitions can be actually put in practice, and that there's clear trust and transparency that the infrastructure that we're laying out, that the products that we say are sustainable are truly sustainable. Because if the empowerment is something that will come from the knowledge that their actions will bring about the change, that their actions, their change in the culture is something that's important, that's affecting change. So I think that this is one of the things that I'm looking forward to see in the years to come in Saudi Arabia, is the sum of education with the infrastructure in place, and creating this transparency and this trust that every single person can make small changes that will come into a big change in the future that is going to be phenomenal.
Dr. Kishan, just in terms of international cooperation, where do you think there might be a gap to be filled?
So I think that we've seen a tremendous space globally for an increasing role by our partners in the Gulf, in the Arab Gulf, for shaping the global agenda. We saw some positive outcomes coming on the green agenda out of the G20 through Saudi Arabia's presidency. We'll see very positive outcomes coming out of the climate COP28 hosted in UAE, and other examples that are on the agenda recently and in the near future. I think there's a tremendous role for Saudi Arabia in particular, but also the GC together, to advance this green transition agenda globally in concert with the United Nations, with international NGOs, with multinationals, but also with the new generation in Saudi Arabia, bringing that vision of green transition that's emerging in Saudi youth through some of the new leaders, entrepreneurs in the private sector as well, and to really have that make impact globally, including through external investments from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf into the green transition in partner countries across the developing world, but also to reduce the footprint of natural resource development and imports, of course, most natural resources and many commodities in the Gulf and in Saudi in particular being import driven into Saudi Arabia. So reducing those footprints through the production. So the South-South cooperation across Africa and Asia in particular, I would say is a tremendous opportunity to really become, I would say, the next gen global sustainability leaders. We've seen the transition from the 50s to now of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries being natural resource dependent economies and becoming quite prosperous. I think we can see from now to 2050 a major opportunity before leadership in the region and in Saudi Arabia to become the next gen leaders in the region, in the MENA region, but globally really on the green transition. And we stand ready to work together with the partners again.
Yeah, and a lot of focus on new sectors, of course, including a recommitment to manufacturing, which is a big sort of, I suppose, angle to take from where they've been so far. Dr. Anna, we'll have to let you have the last half a minute. Just your top of your wish list. What do you think is what would be on your wish list for Saudi to implement in terms of its circular drive that it's not doing already?
Clearly, I think that's an effort that is already mentioned on education, and it needs to be a strong pillar of the future plans, and it is already. So I think definitely the education aspect of society will enhance and will support any future plans from the kingdom, and also the aspect of the innovation ecosystem. I think Saudi Arabia has a potential, enormous potential to drive a lot of the changes that are needed, and we are seeing this happening every day. It could start in a lab, it could move to a startup, and then to a big corporate trying to partner with an institution like CALS, for example, to drive the change. And again, driving the change is something that is in my mind. I think as a higher education institution, as we'd like to lead by example. So we one of my top lists is actually to be able to showcase as CALS, as a leading institution, a higher education institution, are providing resources, knowledge, and research and innovation, and supporting society in the kingdom to move forward. So that's my biggest wish list. I think we are in a great path. I'm excited to see the changes. As Anna also mentioned, it's being a big shift. And again, I'm moving again for the generation. And I must say that our young generation that is actually in the campus right now, they are driving the change. They are part of a lot of the projects we are doing. The biggest group and more active group in our university is Sustainability Students Group. And this is amazing to see, and led by Saudis and women, which I love it. So the gender equality aspect and empowering the new generations and women. So that's what makes me continue and to support and to empower the students also in this university.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anna. And as you said, the point you started with, which is open innovation, sharing ideas as well, not just, providing solutions, but sharing ideas and hopefully economizing them on resources in terms of how we reach those goals. Thank you very much to Dr. Anna, Dr. Kishan, to Yasmin and Anna for joining us today on the Microsoft Sustainability Dialogues. Great to have you all on the podcast, on the program, and to share your insight on that. Thank you so much for joining us.